Disco Elysium is a 2019 RPG developed by Estonian studio Zom. Its story centers on an alcoholic down-on-his-luck detective assigned to solve and investigate a lynching in Martinez, a rundown district of the city of Revachol. And that's as concise as I can get without branching off into other areas, because Disco Elysium is so much more than your standard whodunit. But we'll get back to that later. Now, you might be asking yourself, didn't you already cover this? Well, yes, my good friend, I did cover it a year ago, but that was the standard version. This is the final cut, the real deal. Disco Elysium as it was originally envisioned, with full voice acting, a fast travel system that is, mostly functional and tons of other quality of life features. But here's the thing, this video isn't going to be a review of the final cut itself. The release of the final cut was the perfect excuse for me to revisit this game and ignore my ever-expanding backlog of games. It's also a great opportunity to take a deeper look at Disco Elysium, having gained the benefit of hindsight and grown as a content creator. And let's face it, that video isn't very good. I mean, it's competent and I stand by every word I said there, but let's just say that by covering a game like Disco Elysium for my second video, I bit a little more than I could metaphorically chew. So think of this video as the final cut version of the one I did in February 2020, if you will. Finally, please be warned that I will spoil some minor quest outcomes in this video. I will try my damnedest to make this video accessible to those who have never played Disco Elysium and hopefully enjoyable and insightful to those that have. Alright, time to go work in the shit factory. From its very first seconds, Disco Elysium makes it very clear that this isn't your typical police procedural. The game kicks off not with a panoramic view of Revachol's cityscape or the now iconic but cliché image of the detective surrounded by mounds of paperwork and bottles of cheap booze, but in the void of the player character's subconscious. The warm, primordial blackness, as the game poetically puts it. From the pitch darkness of your tortured subconscious emerge two very peculiar beings. The ancient reptilian brain and the limbic system. They are not particularly friendly. They take turns at mocking the bloated, shameful ball of meat representing your body, now barely functional after years of substance abuse, and hint at some deeply hidden psychological traumas. As the conversation goes on and the character becomes more aware of their existence, it becomes apparent that this state of nothingness was a dream. Or rather, a sinister carnival of anxieties and nonsensical thoughts that the brain is trying to filter and process while the physical body is dormant. And then, as the physical world creeps through the cracks of your subconscious, you wake up in a trashed hotel room with the most excruciating headache known to mankind and with no recollection of your past life. You drank so much that you literally erased your memory. You get on your feet and hobble around the hotel room, trying to pick up what remains of your life. A pair of pants next to a smashed bathroom door, a tie hanging ominously from the ceiling fan, a single shoe in the corner of the room. I said single shoe because, you see, the other one was the victim of what experts call a drunken act of footwear defenestration. After completing the arduous task of putting some clothes on, you find yourself in the equally difficult conundrum of having to find your face. What the character sees in the mirror is up to the player. The player can have our confused detective delude himself into thinking that it's the image of a superstar cop, or the face of a late-stage alcoholic. Whatever the player chooses in this exercise of literal self-reflection doesn't change the course of events that led up to this moment. This woman, the very first person you talk to, treats your inability to remember your past as a police officer with a combination of baffled amusement and pity. Gart, the cafeteria manager, is not as sympathetic towards your drunken antiques. You trashed the hotel room, scared off his customers, made one of the waitresses quit, destroyed his precious stuffed bird, and, as if that wasn't enough, you had the audacity to ask him if he's a bartender. He's not. He manages free places like this one, he's a manager, okay? But the true extent of your fuck-ups become apparent only when you talk to Kim Kitsuragi, a detective from Precinct 57 who was assigned to assist you in the lynching case. Apparently you've been fucking around for 3 days, drinking, snorting speed and causing havoc instead of working the case, leaving the body of the victim to hang and rot in the open. So yeah, welcome to Disco fucking Elysium. This is just the first half hour of the game and trust me, I skipped over a lot of details. The amnesiac main character might be a tired cliche by now, but Disco Elysium proves that cliches work as long as they're implemented well and lead to interesting encounters. Take for instance the first time you question Gart, where the main character explains his inability to remember his name as being in between names, like when you've left your band but haven't decided on a solo artist name yet. It's such a small moment, but it proves that the writers haven't resorted to this trope out of laziness, that they were onto something. But we'll touch on the writing later. So now might be the perfect time to talk a little bit about the setting.
Kuno doesn't fucking care.
Disco Elysium is set in a world not unlike ours, 50 years after a failed communist revolution plunged the world into ruin and decay. Novelist and Studio Zom director Robert Kurvitz created a world in a drunken evening with a group of friends while listening to Tiesto's Adagio for Strings out of all things. Seeing the potential of this setting, they formed a collective of musicians and artists, which included oil painter Alexander Rostov, and developed a tabletop RPG based on Dungeons and Dragons around this setting. This spawned a novel written by Kurvitz, which didn't sell good, and finally the game, which is set in the same universe as the book. Robert Kurvitz once described this setting as 70s cop show in an original, fantastic, realist setting with swords, guns and motor cars. That's accurate, but the way I describe it is New York in the 70s with some Eastern European sensibilities sprinkled on top. The game takes place in Martinez, a district of the once great city of Revachol, now under the control of a foreign coalition government that landed 50 years ago and crushed the communist revolution. Time hasn't been kind to Martinez. In fact, time seems to have not moved at all, as the district seems to have been stuck in a post-revolutionary limbo for the last 50 years, both socially and ideologically. The vestiges of the revolution are everywhere you look. Bombed down buildings dominate the landscape of the district and the walls are still riddled with bullet holes visible to the naked eye. Martinez is home to various extremist factions and organized crime groups that compete with each other for the few resources that remain. Poverty, disease, alcoholism and drug abuse run rampant in Martinez, with most locals living in squalor and filth in the few buildings that haven't already collapsed. It's definitely not a nice place to live in, but soon enough the locals might lose even the little they have. The game hints that Martinez is starting to gentrify, as real estate companies from downtown Revachol are looking to cash in on the district's past bohemian reputation and transform it into a hipster paradise. It's a bleak and depressing place, a puddle at the end of some drain pipe, as Kim accurately put it. But this is just a district of Martinez. Beyond the canal whose bridge may or may not have been shut down due to your drunken antiques lies a fishing village, surrounded by a post-economic wasteland littered with rundown factories, old military bunkers, a church and an abandoned fish market. Here only a few families and homeless drunks live. If Martinez is home to Revachol's rejects, these are the rejects of the rejects. The bleak post-industrial setting coupled with the watercolor aesthetic created by artist Alexander Rostov makes Disco Elysium a truly brooding experience. But is Disco Elysium that depressing?
No, don't listen to him. It's madness. Just talk. As you blow this joint, behind you, a whiny voice shouts.
Real mature, man. Real mature.
Well, yes and no. When it comes to Disco Elysium, talking about the RPG mechanics and the narrative separately is nigh on impossible. Not because it's a story-driven RPG with no combat, rather because they're intertwined to the point that they're almost one and the same. Let's start from the beginning. So right before the game starts, you're dropped into character building. Here you can either choose one of 3 archetypes, or if you're feeling courageous you can build your character from scratch. There are 3 detective archetypes: Thinker, Sensitive and Brute. The Thinker is a sort of Sherlock Holmes type detective driven by logic, facts and reason, but lacking in the social department. Sensitive is kind of like Jimmy McNulty from The Wire. Charming, sociable and gregarious, he knows how to get under people's skin and is both admired and looked at with suspicion for his unorthodox way of working cases. The downside is that sensitives are self-centered and prone to substance abuse. Finally, the Brute is your Vic Mackey from The Shield or John Hartigan from Sin City, more in tune with the physical than the mental, meaning that they prefer smashing doors instead of paperwork. For a first playthrough, I recommend going with Sensitive as it offers a good mixture of narrative and survivability. Yes, there's no combat in Disco Elysium, but that doesn't mean you can't die. Whatever archetype you go for, as you complete quests and go through the story beats, you are free to build your character however you want. There are 4 attributes: Intellect, Psyche, Physique, and Motorics. Seems basic at first glance, but the skills derived from each of these attributes are not as straightforward. You see, these skills are effectively fragments of your subconscious. They represent the often contradictory mechanisms that power your decision-making process. It's your internal monologue but broken down neatly into several entities, each with its own personality and agenda. Electrochemistry, for instance, is the devil on your shoulder, pushing you to day drink and get fucked up on drugs because that's what cool detectives do. Volition urges you to resist the temptation of the bottle, be a good guy and do the right thing. It gives you the will to see things through and finish the case. Savoir-faire is your intrinsic ability to talk and act cool, to dance to a good beat, slip by unnoticed, catch perps off guard with your acrobatic flair. Empathy will tell you when to stop pushing a certain line of questioning, while authority urges you to assert your dominance and it enables you to establish control of situations. But then there are the weird, more esoteric skills that contribute absolutely nothing to your ability to solve cases, but offer insights of various degrees of cryptical about the world and yourself. Take Inland Empire. This fucker is the Malkavian of Disco Elysium. It chimes in at the worst possible moments with cryptic anecdotes and riddles that seem so tangential to the case and really everything that it made me scream out of frustration the first time I played this game. But there's more to this skill than meets the eye. If you've invested enough points into Inland Empire, the solution to the case is literally spelled out in the first phase of the investigation. But you have no way of knowing that if it's your first time playing this game. It sounds like the gibberish vomited by the fried synapses of a lifelong junkie. Also, high levels of Inland Empire enables you to talk with inanimate objects and your clothing. Yes, you talk with your tie, and it comes with its own quest. This game's fucking weird. Esprit de Corps is your cop soul. It's one of the few skills that doesn't have a mechanical usage per se. It's a storytelling device. At high levels it helps you empathize with Kim more and teaches you the finer nuances of Revacholian cop culture. It also spawns these short vignettes that capture daily life at your precinct. Shivers is another great one and frankly the hardest to describe without sounding like a crazy person. So, have you ever taken a stroll through the city at night and suddenly felt connected with it? As if the city was more than just a chaotic amalgamation of steel and concrete, but a living, breathing entity with millions of tiny characteristics and imperfections. No? Just me? Well, that's Shivers. It gives you these beautifully written pieces of prose about daily life in the city of Revachol. A person tuning the radio to their favorite station before taking a bath. A lonely car speeding on the highway to the suburbs after a hard day's work. Drops of water leaking from a pipe in some abandoned industrial complex at the periphery of the city. It's a skill that simulates the feelings and sensations only a person who's intimately familiar with a place experiences. And it's, you know, a way for the writers to flex their writing muscles, to be perfectly honest with you. And those are just a few skills. But what makes them so genius is not their weirdness necessarily, but how they're implemented. You see, as much as I like Infinity Engine style CRPGs, one of my biggest gripes with them is how skills are implemented. You pass a strength check to smash a door. You pass an athletics check to dodge a trap or whatever. You pass a speech or charisma check to squeeze out a bit of extra dialogue from an NPC. But that doesn't really say anything about my character or how they'd act, their thought processes and whatnot. Why did they decide to smash that door instead of lockpicking it or, you know, knocking? Was it machismo? A deep-seated hatred for the Door industrial complex? I don't know, I just pressed a button and the game rolled the dice in the background. Disco Elysium takes those systems and turns them upside down. By going for such an esoteric set of skills that are concerned more with the mind and the thought processes behind each decision rather than the physical act of making that decision itself, it opens the door to more role-playing possibilities. When I said that skills are alive and have personalities, I meant that in the most literal sense possible. Well, not literal because they're all part of you. Skills play into the dialogue trees, interjecting with observations and reminding you about key information that you've uncovered earlier. They constantly fight for your attention and push their own agenda, which is really a fancy way of saying that it simulates conflicting thoughts. Say you're about to order a pizza, and fiscal responsibility chimes in to remind you that you've just bought groceries, so maybe it'd be cheaper if you just cooked something at home. And then the TV goes, well, how the fuck are you supposed to enjoy Meravistown without a pizza with prosciutto crudo and rucola laying appetizingly on your lap? And just when you're about to cave and type the name of your favorite pizzeria in the food ordering app, suddenly the ghostly silhouette of your unmixed salad yells, "Fuck you, TV bought on discount, this is my domain!" Anyway, you get the idea. These are what are known as passive checks. The way this works is that the game will roll a dice in the background, and depending on how many points you've invested in the relevant skill, it will open up additional dialogue choices or pieces of information. To give you just a quick example, I tried to bum a cigarette from this dude here, to which he replied that he doesn't smoke. Because my perception skill was low, my character didn't notice that he was smoking right in front of my fucking face. So their purpose is mainly to guide the player in conversations and add context to the lore-heavy world in which Disco Elysium is set. Think of them as your reliable mental assistants, documenting your exploits and chiming in with useful information whenever you are stuck. But are they reliable? Well, as it turns out, they're not. There's one scene early in the game where Volition warns you that your skills have been compromised by the presence of an attractive woman, which leads to a hilarious scene where the skills start fighting with each other about who's the most compromised. Then there are the active checks. Disco Elysium made attempting skill checks fun for me again and effectively solved all the issues I had with other RPGs. The difference lies in how they're implemented mechanically and meshed with the narrative. Because Disco Elysium has no combat system in the traditional sense, Zom had to double down on making these interactions as interesting and, depending on the player, batshit insane as possible. Whether you're kicking a mailbox and then immediately patting it, prompting the inanimate object to reply that it won't stand for your psychological manipulation, or passing a conceptualization check to paint "fuck the police" on some wall to the bafflement of your partner, your actions make sense to the character you're trying to roleplay as. One scene that stuck with me was when I had to interrogate Everard Clare, the mob boss slash president of the Union of Dock Workers in Martinez. Noah Caldwell-Gervais pointed out that other RPGs would have turned this interaction into a boss fight. And to some degree, your conversation with Everard Clare is a boss fight, but it's a battle of wits. It's a verbal battle where Everard casually inserts personal information about your life into the conversation that he'd picked up via his extensive network of spies to catch you off guard, knowing full well that you're suffering from amnesia. At the beginning of the conversation, he invites you to sit down on a shoddy and uncomfortable chair, and he refuses to talk with you until you obey. This can go in two directions. You either pass a composure check, after which you sink deeper into the chair, acknowledge his power play and quip, "Listen, Everard, pal, we both know what makes the wheels of the world turn, like the coolest motherfucker this side of Revoshol," or you fail the composure check and start crying. But here's the thing, you might be tempted to save scum your way into passing all the checks, but I urge you, no, I beg you to roll with the punches. Failing checks in this game is always just as fun as passing them and can lead to some hilarious situations or even unlock new options to solve quests. Here's me failing a shivers check and undressing myself so I could connect with the city better, or making a fool of myself in front of these old men, or failing to lift a barbell. It's also worth mentioning that the game has plenty of systems in place to help players pass skill checks, like modifiers. If you fail a skill check, you can retry it after investing a point in the relevant skill. And sometimes the game will allow you to retry right away if certain conditions are met. Most of us will probably attempt to fight the lumbering bastion of racial tolerance called Measurehead, and fail miserably. But then Volition will chime in and offer an immediate retry. which I gladly took and finished off Measurehead with a 360 spin kick. Oh yeah, remember when I said this game is depressing? Well, it's also extremely inhumanly funny. Your character is a pulsating ball of chaotic energy and the mechanics are there to help you unleash it into the world. I usually like to play the straight man in video games because, well, I'm boring. But here I just couldn't help myself but pick the stupidest fucking dialogue choices and causing as much havoc as possible. But believe it or not, there is more. Let's talk about the beast of a mechanic called the Thought Cabinet. According to Robert Kurvitz, this feature almost sank the game, and I can see why. Implementing it into the game must have been just as difficult as pitching it to investors. The Thought Cabinet is basically a second inventory where you store and internalize the thoughts that pop up as a result of conversations and exploration. And oh boy, they are something. So on a basic level, they are perks that give you particular effects, usually in the form of skill adjustments. For instance, one thought might give you -1 suggestion but +1 psych. Another one might increase the level cap of a particular skill or have no effect at all. But that's not all. Thoughts are also a representation of your personality and place in the world. This can come in the form of a political ideology or an event from the past that went on to define you as a person. For example, saying, "I am the law," every time you meet a new person eventually unlocks the law jaw thought. The context is that you're doing this weird thing with your jaw every time you assert your authority and you're prompted to find out the cause. Internalizing it reveals that you had polio as a kid, which caused this physical defect. Another thought has you entertain the idiotic notion that you are a superstar cop. After you gain enough honor points, authority pops up and prompts you to ritualistically stick your thumb up your ass to form the Arch of Honors. I know that I'm just talking about these mechanics instead of analyzing them, but some of them are so fucking crazy that I can't help myself. Like, here's a thought that upon internalization makes you think you're a magnesium-based life form. Why? I don't know, man, this guy's bonkers. What glues the skill and thought mechanics together is the sheer amount of reactivity Disco Elysium provides. The degree to which this game keeps track of your actions is insane. What's more, Disco Elysium didn't stop here because there are flavors of reactivity that come in many forms and are triggered by hundreds of variables. Open enough containers and you'll get the Jamrock Shuffle thought. Internalize it and you're not only rewarded with better loot from containers, but also a piece of lore that reveals that the Jamrock Shuffle is actually a police tactic employed by police officers from Precinct 41 who grew up in the poorest districts of Jamrock and used to scavenge catacombs as kids. Another example of delayed reactivity concerns a door in the back of a cafeteria. My character was drawn by this door because, of course he was, after which he cryptically stated that the door and the investigation will merge into a stereo investigation. Later, when it becomes clear that there is a link between this door and the investigation, Kim acknowledges it and declares that it is indeed a stereo investigation and that the door has indeed converged with the main investigation. And this brings us full circle to the beginning of this lengthy section. The reactivity as well as the design philosophy behind its skill and thought systems confers Disco Elysium with a high degree of replayability. The overarching story will remain largely the same regardless of your build. After all, it's a whodunit. There's only one possible solution to the case. The difference lies in how you get there. Do you shoot a body down or ask the dock workers for help? Will you do Everard's dirty work to find your missing badge and gun, or find a way to trick him? To use a tart cliché, the beauty in Disco Elysium is in the journey, not the destination. And what a beautifully written, depressingly uplifting journey it is. So let's talk about the writing and the quests.
I am the mic enforcer. I am the chick's checker. Yeah!
In a game where most of your time is spent reading, the writing has to be good. Well, that point is kind of moot now because the Final Cut added full voice acting for the 1 million or so words the script has. Just to give you a point of reference, the entire A Song of Ice and Fire saga has a word count of 1,770,000 words. The Lord of the Rings trilogy has a word count of 5,000... Anyway, here's the number. So Disco Elysium's script is twice as long as all the Lord of the Rings books put together. And they're good words, goddammit! But unlike many CRPGs, Studio Zone went a step further and put as much effort into making Disco Elysium fun to read as they did into making it well written. For this, they had to find a way to present the beefy script in a digestible format. So they looked to Twitter. Yes, I'm not shitting you. Twitter was their inspiration. The text is displayed in a rectangular box in the right hand side of the screen. The flow of the prose and dialogue emulates the flow of social media, so you'll only see 5-6 lines of text at a time interspersed by fragments of your subconscious. It's a genius way to present text, and I wish other CRPGs would experiment with this format. As for the writing itself, Robert Kurvitz uses a writing technique called mass editing. It involves having people from various backgrounds assessing the readability of the text. Think of it as a text fat trimming technique. It's usually used for journalistic articles and marketing copy. As a result of this, the writing is concise, punchy, and snappy. The prose is written with an economy of language in mind, so each word feels heavy and impactful, like being punched repeatedly in the gut. What surprised me the most about Disco Elysium's writing is its masterful management of tone. It shifts from tragedy to zany humor to poignant social commentary and back with the grace of a master fencer. One moment you're instinctively dialing the number of some long-forgotten ex-girlfriend, and the next you're helping a group of ravers open a club in an abandoned church. One moment you're turning Gart's refusal to let you dive into his trash cans into a political issue, and in the next you're licking rum off a dirty bar counter. And then you got lines like these.
Thick, warm smoke gets sucked into your lungs. Immediately you feel a warm nostalgia fill your head, body, and soul. A nostalgia for yourself, the man you were in your youth. Johnny Thundercop is back, and he's chill as balls. Fuck you, mail delivery box. I live in a dumpster, I don't care. Fuck everything, Hobocop. As always, I am the Lawbringer. Yeah, death is nothing. I shit on death. Wear the hood, wear the hood, wear the hood at. Have a brother in the cut where the wood at.
Time to go to work in the shit factory.
This white satin shirt used to be fancy. It used to really catch the light. Now, it smells like someone took a piss in the armpits. Fucking right. Whatever it takes to survive. I am the seagull.
The quests in this game follow pretty much the same formula of oscillating between realistic and absurd. One quest has you investigate the so-called doomed commercial district, a complex of businesses that went bankrupt due to a supposed curse. While Disco Elysium does occasionally flirt with the supernatural, this is the only instance where it doesn't outright deny its existence. Interestingly, while exploring the district, you stumble into an abandoned gaming studio. Studying their sketches and notes reveals that they were working on an ambitious RPG whose complexity surpassed the technology available. The studio was slowly marred by infighting, conflicting creative visions, and bad management, and eventually ran out of money and closed. As Kim remarks, the less money they had, the more ambitious they became. Anyway, after a little detour that may or may not have involved a giant ice cream fridge in the form of a bear, you meet the last business owner operating in the doomed district, a novelty dice maker. If you were hoping for a supernatural explanation, well, prepare to be disappointed, as the truth, as always, is pretty mundane. So apparently the businesses didn't go bankrupt due to some ancient curse, rather a combination of idiotic business decisions, incompetency, and bad luck. The hair salon shut down quickly because their main selling point was offering androgynous haircuts in a working class district. The taxidermist was a drug addict who wasted his days inhaling taxidermy chemicals instead of running his business. The fashion atelier produced a collection that used chitin materials. They were doing well until a group of insect activists managed to shut down their biggest chitin suppliers, causing the price of the material to skyrocket and bankrupting the atelier as a result. There was another company that promised to repair windows 24 hours a day. Turns out the business was a front for an illicit group that made snuff films. It's an anticlimactic conclusion to a quest that hinted at the existence of supernatural phenomena, and I love it for that. Of course, that won't stop you from telling the quest giver that yes, the doomed commercial district was indeed cursed and you, the famous supernatural detective, managed to banish it. As quirky as Disco Elysium can get, it knows when to step back and let the serious real-life moments be serious. One quest has you track down the missing husband of a working class woman. You find him dead on the boardwalk, having slipped and hit his head against a bench after a night of heavy drinking. You then go to announce his widow, and the moment is played straight. No jokes, no interruptions from your skills urging you to lick frozen whiskey off some lamppost. just raw emotion. It's just you, Kim, and the grieving widow, who is trying to come to terms with the fact that after so many days-long drinking binges, this is the one he'll never return from. Underneath all the zaniness and the stupid DMX references lies a vulnerability that many writers and developers are afraid to express. What makes the humor and sharp social commentary in Disco Elysium click is that all of its characters feel human. From the uptight bookstore owner, corrupt union leader to the wannabe gang members and annoyingly cheery dock worker, characters in this game feel like actual people, not on-demand lore and quest dispensers. The story's emotional core is your relationship with the honorable and wholesome partner, Lieutenant Kim Kitsuragi. Unlike most games where you play as the straight man, in Disco Elysium, you are the comic relief with a tragic backstory, so Kim is the one who has to put up with your shit. And what a wonderful job he does. He indulges your antiques and distractions and respects your countless character quirks and idiosyncrasies. He views your frequent substance abuse not with disdain and disgust, but empathy and understanding. Kim knows that being a cop in one of the roughest districts in Revachol must have taken a psychological toll on you, and tries his best to work around your traumas and not push any buttons. It would have been so easy for Studio Zom to make Kim this annoying party pooper who rolls his eyes every time you say something stupid, but they didn't. And thank God they put so much effort into writing Kim, because moments like the one where you convince Kim to dance with you through a difficult authority check would never have happened. And that's my take on Disco Elysium. It's a groundbreaking RPG that, to be honest, ruined other RPGs for me. It's that good. No matter how much I write about it and praise it, I don't think I'd ever be able to do it justice. Its world is unique and fascinating, the writing is beautiful and evocative, the RPG mechanics subvert almost every trope of this genre imaginable. I don't know what else to say about it, man. I hope this video will convince you to play it, and if not, well, at least I tried. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.